one example that I was working with a group of high school kids, and they created a whole conference by high school kids for high school kids. And it was just incredible. They recruited speakers, they had it at the UBC Forest Science Center, and they were trying to figure out what the impact of that was. And they said, well, we've got a whole bunch of environmental projects that came out of it, so we'll measure the total tons of CO2 they were reduced as a result of the conference. And while that's kind of interesting, what's more interesting is that what they're actually doing is they're building a community of engaged youth leaders, about youth that actually care about issues, that are taking on projects, that are leading teams, that are interacting with the community, and are becoming active citizens. So a more interesting thing would be to look at, once again, how many people are there year on year, how many projects were started, and how many of those projects survived more than 2 years, how many kids attended first in grade 8 and then were still there in grade 12, and looking at those different ways that you can measure really what you're achieving. So when you think about, back to that question 0, really what are you trying to achieve, that can sort of help you measure those things. And think about, is what you're measuring actually showing how you're succeeding at your mission? So if the mission of that childcare or the literacy is to improve literacy and improve relationships of kids with their parents, measuring the number of kids through the program is not really going to help you measure that. So what often happens though is you need to iterate through these kind of pieces, and that's why the 15 minutes we're going to spend isn't going to kind of be enough. It'll give you kind of a taste, but often what happens, people look really down at the bottom and then have to come back up, and down at the bottom and come back up until you sort of get to that right level of detail. So we were looking at trying to measure the impact of some of the development agencies in the downtown east side around what is happening with that money, what local economic benefit happening, is there an environmental benefit, and so on. And one of the things that is an interesting concept that Morgan came up with is looking at time and space in terms of your measurements. Are the things that you're measuring activities and outcomes that are happening right now, like what's happening this quarter in your organization? Or are they measuring things that are going to happen later this year? Or are there things that are going to happen farther down the road? And the farther down the road you get from a particular activity or particular project, the harder it is to measure some of those kind of things. So sometimes it may be aspirational to do that, but you can put in longer term measurements. Phoenix Print Shop in Toronto is a social enterprise. They bring in local street youth that can stay there for a year. They can live and they can get trained in Photoshop, print skills, print design skills, and so on. And they use surveys every 6 months for 3 years after they leave the program, asking about whether they're employed, life satisfaction, self-esteem, those different kind of pieces. So you can track things that go far beyond the impact of that program. That takes a while to set up, but you can look at where you're capturing those pieces. The other thing to look at is, where are you measuring? Are you measuring things that only impact inside the organization? For example, the efficiency you have with your financial resources. That's good. You want to measure that. But if that's the only thing you're measuring, it doesn't actually capture how you're relating to people outside the organization. Are you building partnerships with the community? What kind of environmental impact are you making, and so on. So the idea with this slide is that not that any of these are right or wrong, but this is just a bit of a check. If you actually create all of your metrics and look at how are we measuring, it turns out that all of them are right here and all of them are right here. You may want to look at rebalancing those and look at how do we actually measure things that are going to show a longer term impact. And for a lot of sort of social change and environmental change, that may require investment or partnership to look at, okay, we can't measure a 3-year impact yet, but we're going to put that in place, and we're going to start adding those kind of pieces as we go through year on year. So I'll give you one quick case study of sort of how those kind of pieces can fit together with another social enterprise here. United We Can. So how many people know United We Can? Okay. So this is, I just took these off their website today, and it's interesting trying to, what I know about United We Can, and then reading their website and trying to figure out what they actually do. So this is a good example of that. So basically one of the things that they do is they provide a way for binners, people that are going in bins and collecting cans and bottles, to have a place to return all that and get paid for doing that, and actually you get actual jobs to do those kind of pieces. And when they look at their what they actually do and their goals, creating equity on the downtown east side, using recyclables to alleviate poverty, creating employment, and they have a way to make a donation. But once again, that doesn't really articulate to me what they're actually doing and what they're actually accomplishing. And when you look at their mission, that's even a bit more. Through self-sustaining urban enterprises, United We Can creates community income and job training for people in Vancouver's downtown east side. So that's actually not bad of an actual statement. It's relatively concrete. The challenge is that there's nothing on the website that actually articulates to people whether they're actually doing this or not. So one of the things that I do know from a study that Van City did with them is that this is what they actually did in 2008. So those 150 jobs, that's actually real jobs with T4 forms that were issued to 150 people in downtown Eastside. Those are now people that not only have income, but have a slip of paper that shows proof of income that they can use to get a rental accommodation, that they can do some of those kind of pieces. 20 million containers in 2008 recycled, putting $2 million of economic benefit back into residents of the downtown Eastside. So the interesting piece is that I knew these numbers because I work with United We Can and other sort of organizations, but they don't actually yet have those numbers on their website. So it's an interesting kind of example of, you can see how that kind of, the next logical step would be, someone says, okay, this is our objectives, but are you actually doing that? Show me how you're actually proving and what you're doing, those kind of pieces. But I think looking at these things here, you can start to see that if you have these pieces here, that directly speaks to the mission of the organization. Providing employment support, providing economic benefit, and providing the environmental pieces. If you wanted, you could go to the next step further and say, that $2 million, you could do some estimates to say how much of that $2 million was actually re-spent in the downtown east side with local businesses, and how much money was plowed back in the local economy, do some multiplier effect analysis. You could also look at what's the CO2 or the landfill impact on those 20 million containers not going into the landfill. You could do some analysis on those jobs, what's the impact on reduced burden on social services. People that are actually making income that don't need to be on social assistance and some of those kind of pieces. Once again, you need to balance that. The farther out you get for that, the more you go down that path, it can be interesting, but it can also take more of an effort to kind of really put those kind of pieces together. So you need to kind of have that balance of looking at how do you sort of have some of the short-term pieces and look at the long-term pieces. So I talked for a bit longer than I kind of wanted to there, but now I actually want you guys to figure this out. So we've got quite a few people here. How about we kind of split like down here, and this is kind of a group here, this is another group here, this is another group here, and another group here. And I've got some paper and markers. And what I want you to do is, looking within the groups, figure out that there's lots of nonprofits here, there's lots of social enterprises here, there's lots of other kind of businesses here. Pick one of those organizations to use as a mini case study and go through some of these kind of questions. And we're going to get to the point where we come up with just 3 things. 3 things that can help answer your questions here and help communicate kind of what that is.